on this episode of Back Talk.
I would say that an engineering team that I think is stellar has the ability to really see what you're seeing. And of course, the only way they're going to be able to do that is that if you as a surgeon is able to communicate all of that effectively. I think life is all about learning.
Yeah.
And if you don't critically think about yourself, you're never going to learn.
How do you feel good about doing that?
Okay, well, first of all, the rocket is such a cooler name than a cricket. A rocket
The cricket was great.
Come on, rocket is speed, it's energy, it's force, it's transformative. A cricket is just a squeaky bug.
The newest hot take is there's a lot of disruption going on in the United States around the FDA, right? We're
Yep.
hearing about a lot of rifts coming, and I'm curious what your perspective is. Hot take of what's going on right now. What do you think is going to happen with Health and Human Services as it relates to FDA and that impact on our industry?
We are pleased to welcome our guest for this episode, Dr. Hanjo Kim. And now, here are your hosts, Eric Major and Rebecca Whitney.
Welcome back to another episode of Back Talk. I am thrilled to introduce you to this episode's guest, Dr. Hanjo Kim. Hanjo has been in practice at the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York City for over a decade and climbing, and is one of the most intense and successful spine surgeons of the industry. So we are thrilled to talk to him today. And just a fun fact, the very first surgery I ever observed 11 years ago was in Hanjo's OR. So really happy to have him with us today. Hanjo Kim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Full circle, Rebecca.
Full circle, that's right.
Welcome.
So we're thrilled to have you here. I think my first question is, knowing that you have this reputation for being very intense, very successful, obviously you work at a prominent institution, how did you get to where you are? And just take us through your background and what led you to be a spine surgeon in the first place?
Yeah, so I think my interest in spine surgery really started in medical school. So I went to medical school at Columbia, and one of my most favorite rotations was the neurology rotation. Mm-hmm. And I really loved how cerebral it all was, and how you really had to critically think about localizing the lesion. So for example, if you have some deficit in some part of your body, that they have to localize it to a certain area in your brain. And I really enjoyed that part of neurology. Mm-hmm. But what I found is after about 3 hours of opining on a case, after the lesion was identified, they would say, okay, now send it to the surgeon to get it fixed. And I thought, really, I wanted to be involved in that part, the fixing part as well. So I started to get into spine surgery because I feel like spine surgery, more so than a lot of other specialties, they really focus on function and form and quality of life, and everything sort of makes sense. You know, if you have an L5 nerve root compression, for example, you'll have a certain type of deficit that 95% of the time is going to be reproducible. So if you take the stenosis off of that nerve root, you'll result in resolution of the pain symptoms and weakness and neurologic issues as well. So spine surgery, for that reason, was very attractive to me. Mm-hmm. I would say subsequently I was the fortune of tremendous amount of luck. I think it takes passion, but it also takes a lot of luck and for things to sort of fall in your favor. And I was lucky enough to train and do my residency at the Hospital for Special Surgery, which is a tremendous institute and organization. I think now we have over 150 orthopedic surgeons and over 25 spine surgeons within the institution. And you could imagine that sort of organization has a tremendous infrastructure to foster any sort of interest that you may have. And for me, it was spine surgery. When I was there, I met Dr. Wahenoba Boachi, who's a mentor of mine. And he really is an incredible person. We could spend a whole podcast separately talking about everything that he's done in his life. But he was somebody that I could emulate and follow as far as the things that he accomplished throughout his career. Not only was he a fantastic and phenomenal surgeon, but he was also a humanitarian and a very good person with a good amount of balance. And having somebody like that as my mentor was, I think, very critical in my development. And subsequently then, I did my training at WashU in St. Louis, where I had the leadership of Dr. Lenke, Dr. Keith Bridwell, Dr. Buhovsky, Dr. Dan Rue. And I think being surrounded by such giants has really helped form my career and has brought me to where I am today.
Amazing. Yeah, it's been fantastic just to watch you continue to build your career, and again, your reputation speaks for itself. So thank you for that.
It has been an amazing career. You know, when I think about when you and I first met, it was through Dr. Boachi. And today you and I sit on the board of Focus together and kind of helping on that humanitarian side, and it's been a great run. But when we first met, I've watched you kind of skyrocket through the industry. And as a key opinion leader, I think, you know, people would love to know. So you've worked with and engaged with a lot of different companies over the years to bring that expertise. Give us some examples of, not the company names, just examples of your engagement with companies of where you feel like a company does a great job of communicating or does something that you gravitate to that company, and other ones that kind of miss the boat. What are the key things that companies need to know to really appeal to a key opinion leader like you and have that engagement go the right way?
Yeah, you know, I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to relationships, you know, and I think it's important, you know, a lot of the times when spine surgeons start out, they do not know what to expect from industry. It's sort of this sort of black box of, you know, you could have different personalities that you have to manage, and totally different from the personalities that we manage through our training in residency and fellowship and even as a young attending. And I think the relationship is really critical. You want to work with a company that is very receptive to your ideas, obviously is also very, you know, just in general, good people, people that have a similar set of values and principles as far as where you want to drive the company. You know, you may meet people sometimes who have very interesting personalities, let's say, and it's just harder to work with those types of people and industry partners. And at the end of the day, you know, we call it industry partners for a reason, because it's a partnership. You know, there are things and challenges that I face in the operating room that, you know, could be communicated effectively to industry partners who will then give us the enabling technology to be able to perform our surgeries faster, more safely, and to ultimately have better outcomes for our patients. And I think if that sort of marriage is there, where the relationship is good, and people are really listening to each other, then you could really accomplish a lot of really good things. Of course, you need funding and you need you know, revenue and money in order to do some of these things. But I'll give you an example. I'm very into education, and I think one of the things that attract me to industry partners is having the opportunity to be able to teach, to have industry partners who have an investment in education, because at the end of the day, it's sort of a mutually beneficial relationship. For the surgeon, it provides them that opportunity to teach techniques, to teach them lessons that I've learned through thousands of cases. For industry partners, it's beneficial as well, because it allows them to showcase their technology, showcase what they do differently, what allows them to bring that sort of expertise to the operating room from a technical and sort of technological background. So I think companies like that I find to be very attractive, and of course, having a tremendous engineering team to be able to, you know, put into sort of a hardware all the thoughts that we have about working around the problems that we encounter.
That's a great segue. So speaking of design teams, I know you've done quite a bit of work with many companies in that regard as well, which is great. What do you look for from that engineering team and from the company to ensure that the product development process goes as smoothly as possible?
Yeah, you know, I think the problem comes down to communication, because a lot of the times these engineers are so brilliant, but the way that we're communicating our problems is not necessarily heard in the same light. And sometimes you meet an engineering team, for example, that they'll just say no. That is not possible. As opposed to some other engineering teams will say, you know what, I think it might be possible. And at the end of the day, I think it comes down also to ego a little bit, right? Because you know, you could have an engineer that's worked countless hours on a prototype, and we look at it and we say, you know, this is not really going to work for us in the operating room. Yeah. If the engineering team still thinks that, okay, well, I don't know what the surgeon is thinking, this is going to work fine, there's a problem there. Likewise, if the surgeon says, you know what, I could use this, and it could be sort of used by everybody in the country or any other spine surgeon in any situation, that's also a very egotistical way to think about it as well. So I think at the end of the day, you have to put all that aside. You have to see what is a generalizable and applicable technology. You have to try to arrive at that solution with partners from engineering to be able to, and you have to be able to communicate your ideas effectively. And sometimes it requires multiple renditions of communication. you state something one way and it's not heard. But then you say it a slightly different way, and for whatever reason, it allows there to be a light bulb that goes off. And then you're able to kind of go across that barrier and then start to innovate in a meaningful way. Mm-hmm. So, and at the end of the day, the solution for all of that and the foundation for all of it is in the relationship. Mm-hmm. You have to be comfortable with the engineering team. The engineering team has to feel comfortable with you. You have to be comfortable making a mistake. They have to be comfortable making a mistake. At the end of the day, everybody's comfortable with each other, and that allows you to really achieve a high-functioning team.
I love it. So Eric and I were talking earlier. We're on the same team now, but we were competitors back in the day because when I first met you, I was with Biomet. I had just joined Biomet, and Eric, of course, was running K2M. So we first met at SRS in Alaska. We were doing a design team project. And why don't you tell the story? Because you've got the background here.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, all right, you'll remember. So we're in Alaska at SRS, 2013, I think, and we'd been talking forever because of the relationship with Oheneba and your expertise and a key opinion leader. Been out to dinner a number of times and up till 2 a.m, right, having drinks. So we're out that night till like 2 a.m, just having a drink and chatting, and then walking back to the hotel, and it's like a breakup. Like you paused. And you said to me, I've made a decision. I'm like, what do you mean you made a decision? I'm going to go with Biomet Spine versus working with you at K2 on that particular project. Left me at the altar completely. And then I find out years later it was Rebecca. So I want to know, I just want you to know that hurts still. We had to work together for you to finally, come over to the team.
Well, all I can say is if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. So
here we
it is what it is, right?
That's right. So we're all on the same team now.
We were talking about that story before you came in.
Yeah, we were laughing, comparing notes from different perspectives because we didn't even know each other back then.
That's right.
But it all comes full circle. So that's great.
So do you ever, when you have those engagements with engineers you talked about, product managers, engineers, sometimes they must come into the OR and you're like, they don't even understand what I'm trying to show them. Is there some uniformity of how often they need to be coming, or is it just the seniority of those engineers, or it really varies? What has your experience been between a team that comes in and they're on it and a team that just doesn't seem to get it?
Yeah, I think teams that are willing to really learn and to get into it require multiple visits to the operating room, because a lot of the times, we have wounds where the hole is sort of deep. They can't really see everything that's happening and the struggles that we're having and what sort of mechanical solutions that could be made based on certain issues. And that's our job as surgeons to communicate that. And I would say it's the job for the engineers to be able to visualize it. Mm-hmm. And I think visualization is so important because if you have deliberate practice with visualization, it'll allow you to really execute at a high level. So I would say that an engineering team that I think is stellar has the ability to really, really see what you're seeing. And of course, the only way they're going to be able to do that is that if you as a surgeon is able to communicate all of that effectively. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not easy because we gloss over certain portions of the case that we may not consider to be challenging, while some other population of surgeons may consider it to be very challenging. So our job is to sort of put it out exactly the way it is, step by step, very deliberate, and then help the engineers to visualize what we're visualizing so that they could come up with a solution.
How do you think about the local representation as it relates to the corporate side on the product management, engineer, product manager, everything happening at the corporate level? How important is it to also have somebody local to help set those things up, be there in your experience?
For whether it's good or bad, spine is still, I think, one sort of implant technology that requires a lot of sort of sales representation. And the reason why I say that is because, for example, if you look at hip and knee replacements, you kind of just open up one hip, one knee replacement. It's kind of standard parts. You put those implants in, and then you're done with your knee replacement. The thing about spine surgery is that every single segment of the spine is different, and there might be deformities that are specific to a level. Mm-hmm. For example, somebody might have a deformity that requires a surgery from T10 to pelvis, but in that, somebody's spine, the pedicles may align perfectly. Some of them may actually be off because of the deformity. They may have a lateral listhesis, a significant depth with spondylolisthesis, where certain screws, for example, may not work in the construct, right? So having a very knowledgeable sales staff on the back table is instrumental in allowing you to get through the case efficiently. Because if you need a certain screw size, if you need a certain different type of screw, different type of head, if you need a certain type of connector at different points of the construct, that's really important. And not only is it just the sizes, but it's also seeing what the versatility of your platform that you provide can do for the surgeon and what they're trying to accomplish. A lot of the times, for example, I can't tell you how many times you have somebody who's somewhat of an inexperienced rep in the room, and you'll ask them, well, I need a domino that's a 5.5 to 3.5, and they just stare at you, and they say, and you just ask them, do you have that? And they say, I'm not sure. So this is where you're not going to really encounter that problem when you're doing a hip and knee replacement, but you're going to encounter that problem in spine surgery. And for us, having a very seamless and smooth operative experience is something that is very favorable for us when we're reviewing a company. So I think sales and sort of the troops at the ground level when it comes to the actual sale of implants in spine is still extremely relevant. And I think also a healthy level of communication between those representatives with corporate is also very important. Because if corporate and the C-suite is entirely disconnected, they might be pushing the company in a direction that's not necessarily meeting the needs of the surgeon and then ultimately our patients.
Yeah. Love it.
Great feedback.
Yep, that's great. Okay, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I have a question for you. When I pulled up my phone to communicate with you about this podcast, what popped up is a lion. So my question is, tell me how this came to be your profile picture. You're known for being very intense, which is a good thing. I like intense a lot. What's up with the lion headshot?
Yeah, so the lion headshot is, first of all, lion's my favorite animal. Yeah. But I like that shot specifically because I was in safari at the Okavango Delta. And after the Okavango Delta, we went on a little excursion in the area of Botswana where there's an elephant sort of camp. But then also there's a pride of 3 male lions. And I just remember that when we were in the safari truck, the safari guide said, just if you stay still, they won't consider you as a separate entity within the truck. They'll just consider the whole truck as one thing, and they'll just walk by you. They think you're like a rock or some stone that's been sitting there or a tree. So I remember that I sat there and I was just watching, and I took out my camera to try to take a photo. And it's like the lion made eye contact with me and just kept on walking closer and closer. And I said, wow, this is an amazing shot. I stayed completely still. I just clipped as many snapshots as I could. But that shot is
You took that picture?
I took that picture.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, I took that picture on my iPhone.
Wow.
That's brilliant.
And the lion was seriously, probably like 10 feet away. And I thought it was a very powerful moment for me also because I was, shortly after that, COVID started. And there was a lot of political riffraff going around about discussions, and it also gave me a lot of time because the hospital was closed down from operating for 3 months, and I was in the ICU covering the COVID patients. But I remember doing a lot of reading, and I remember one of the things that I read was, in life you want to be lion, not sheep. And because of that, I thought it was really powerful for me, and I wanted to make it my profile photo because of that.
I love it.
That's a great story.
Yeah, love it. Thank you.
Then I'm going to have to ask you, as part of being a lion, is it true or false that you have a pull-up bar in your office?
I do have a pull-up bar in my office, yes.
How many pull-ups can you do?
On a good day? Probably about 30.
30 straight?
Yeah, 30 straight pull-ups.
And are you doing those before or after you have meetings with companies?
Sometimes in between.
I love it.
Okay, so my follow-up question is, who out of the 3 of us do you think could do the most pull-ups? Well, we already know it's you. Out of the 2 of us, who do you think
Wait, what do you mean? That was quick.
You think you can do more than Hanjo? More than 30?
30's a lot. I don't know, but
Depends. Sometimes I do weighted pull-ups, and if I do weighted pull-ups, I can only do like 15. But depends how much weight I put on.
That's what I was just going to
You
ask.
just threw that in there.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Just threw that in there. That's great for the podcast.
But between both of you guys, though, I don't know. It's kind of tough, I think both of you are very intense. I respect both of your personalities tremendously. I would say, because of that, there's this underlying grit where you put your mind ahead of whatever you want to accomplish, and then you could just somehow make it done. You could amaze your body because you don't think that you could do it. But if you put your mindset towards it, it's amazing what you could accomplish. So I think both of you, I wouldn't put it past that you could actually do 30. So I mean, maybe on the next podcast we could have pull-up bars, three
There
of
we
them
go.
up here,
I
and
see
see
you throwing down the gauntlet.
see who lasts
okay.
the longest. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's great. So speaking of intensity, has your personality ever gotten you into trouble, not in a bad way, either in the OR or outside of the OR, just kind of being that driver that you are? Is there an incident you can think of that maybe you've pushed a little too hard for all the right reasons and had to course correct?
You know, that's such a great question. I mean, I think life is all about learning.
Yeah.
And if you don't critically think about yourself, you're never going to learn. And I could tell you hundreds of times where I reflect back and I say to myself, maybe I shouldn't have pushed so hard. And I continue to do that.
Yeah.
I would like to think that those times and occurrences happen less and less, but I also feel like as you get older, you get wiser, and you think about it even more, and all the applicable situations. Sometimes, you know, they say the eye doesn't see what the mind doesn't know. When you're young, you just want to push, you just want to go forward, and you don't think about these things necessarily. But as you get older and you think about things more and more, you start to recognize that it's happening, and when it does happen, you're just able to recognize it and sort of control yourself.
Yeah.
I remember one of my many trips to Ghana, to the Focus Hospital, and I think I was maybe like 3 months into being an attending. And obviously when you start out, because you want structure, because you want to make sure that you're doing things correctly, you have a very systematic way of doing things. Getting patients out of bed at a certain time, blood pressure management and surgery, all these things. And what I realized is during the first 3 months when I went to Focus, during my first 3 months of attendingship, by the way, I found that to be a tremendously valuable experience because it also gave me the ability to handle very complex cases very routinely. Mm-hmm. You know, I think Ohana Babawachi brought me there, and he said basically you're going to have about 8 weeks now, and you're going to need to do like a PSO or VCR every day. And I have to go to Addis Ababa or Sierra Leone to see follow-ups. So you're on your own.
Wow.
And I think that was a tremendous learning experience for me to start out, and I found myself fortunate to have that opportunity. But one thing that I realized when Hoerba was gone and he was doing his follow-ups, the nursing, I wanted one of my patients who I just operated on to get up the same day and to mobilize. And I realized that they've never done that. They've never done that there. And for me to have that request was it was out of nowhere, because they didn't expect that. And I said, well, there's no reason why the patient shouldn't be able to get up. We should try to get them up. So I got the patient up myself out of bed in the PACU in between cases. And I went for a walk with them. And I felt good about it at the time. I said, well, look, the patient's walking and we could accomplish this here. But what I realized is actually I was hurting the nursing staff. They felt hurt because I kind of went above what they thought was their duty to do, and they were having the doctor do it. So they felt like they were failing me. Then I showed them that they could do it, and then now they feel like they've been failing a lot because they haven't done that before. Mm-hmm. And I recognize that there's different ways to communicate that and to do things like that, even if it's the right thing. Sometimes, hopefully it's the right thing. Sometimes it's the wrong thing, and you're still trying to push the wrong thing. But I think the value and the most important thing in all of that is to make sure you're able to be critical for yourself, reflect on scenarios, and being sensitive to people around you to make sure that you're always having a high level of emotional intelligence, and you're able to leave the best impression on people. Because at the end of the day, we all have the best intentions, and it just has to be communicated that way.
Yeah,
go ahead.
There are so many parallels to business leadership and surgeon leadership. It's amazing. I mean, everything you said I can relate to. And even if I'm trying to push for good reasons and have that positive intent, if it doesn't land right, you sort of have to be very self-aware and say, hang on a second, I know what I thought and why I'm pushing so hard, but if you're not receptive to how your team is receiving you, it doesn't get there. So totally agree, and thank you for sharing that.
100%.
Yeah, that was great. What I was going to ask is I was thinking through that whole self-awareness thing is a great lesson. And so we talk about your career and what you've been able to achieve and where you are today. So if you spoke to yourself 15 years ago, or you're speaking to residents and fellows today, or someone who just came out, what are some of the lessons learned or some of the feedback you would give those people that are thinking about entering a career in spine?
Yeah, what I would say is stay disciplined, and not only with your actions and what you do every day, but also with yourself. And so, for example, something in a very one-dimensional manifestation of that would be, having a research infrastructure, right? Because if you're an academic spine surgeon, you want to do research, you have to be disciplined with your office staff, your medical assistant, how you run your office so that your outcome scores are measured correctly, the radiographs are done correctly. And if you don't incorporate that into how you practice and how you see patients from day one, it's really hard to incorporate it 5 years later because it becomes a habit for you and you're used to a certain level of efficiency. And if you all of a sudden feel like you're incredibly inefficient because you have to integrate these things, then it becomes very hard to go back to. So I would say stay disciplined with what you want to do. Stay disciplined with also what your goals are. And what I mean by that is sometimes discipline is not just sticking with the regimen, but it's also making sure that your mindset stays uniform. Because you're going to have distractions. You're going to have events in your life that distract you, that kind of keep you off the road. And staying disciplined in that scenario is to stay centered, keeping in mind your goals, and also knowing that it's really a marathon. It's not a sprint. And if you burn yourself out too early, if you get impatient with something that you want to accomplish because it's not here yet, because all of us have personalities where we wanted something yesterday. Mm-hmm. We wanted it to be done yesterday. And at the end of the day, that's just not how life goes, right? If it was, then all of us, I don't know, we may be retired and in coffins already, We don't want that to happen today, right? So I think you have to keep the long-term goal in mind. You have to have the mindset. You have to periodically have insight to yourself to say, be patient. I know you wanted this before, but it's going to happen, but you just have to stay persistent. And then the other side of discipline, which is the perseverance side. So yes, there are going to be times when you feel like you're pushing an elephant in the room, or you feel like everything's an uphill battle. But there's ebbs and flows, and there's going to be times when you could totally fly, and there's going to be times when you're slowing down. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with any of that. And my word of advice to try to deal with that is try to keep your highs low and your lows high.
Yeah,
Fantastic. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for the conversation. Very, very enjoyable. It's been wonderful to have you on the show. Look forward to all of our viewers tuning in for this episode. And so, Dr. Hanjo Kim, thank you so very much.
Well, thank you guys for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Back Talk.
We want to thank Dr. Kim for his hot takes on spine.
See you next time. That was fantastic. I love Hanjo Kim, and it's so fun to have him on the podcast to just hear his perspective. He brings so much insight. He's so grounded, so progressive. He's just fantastic.
Hanjo is a force in spine. He has been, he will continue to be. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Very intense, obviously, with the pull-ups.
Yep.
Right? Not sure, I was happy with the answer for the Alaska, but apparently you won that one.
All's fair.
Yeah. On that one, when he came to you, he came over to Biomed, I kind of want to understand this. So, we had a product at K2 called Mesa. We had something called a Cricket. I don't know if you know this.
I might have heard about it once or twice.
Then I get
Probably
a
from
phone
you.
call. Then I get a phone call from New Zealand that, hey, there's this product that looks just like the Cricket being used. And it turns out that, we had, probably the best reducer in the world. And I want to know how you and your engineering team felt about inventing this thing, and I get this phone call about a rocket. How do you feel good about doing that?
Okay, well, first of all, the Rocket is such a cooler name than the Cricket. A rocket
The Cricket was great.
Come on, rocket is speed, it's energy, it's force, it's transformative. A Cricket is just a squeaky bug. So I think the branding was spectacular on the Rocket, so that's number one. Number two, when you assemble a design team with powerhouses like Hanjo Kim, you get the best and brightest minds. And imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, and I would say that if we were to put the Cricket up against the Rocket would win every time.
Okay,
and now you're part of this team, so...
I am on this team now,
like
but I
the
have to
Rocket.
agree to disagree. It was the innovation that came out of Mesa, but that's okay. I mean, now we're on the same team, we'll go win.
So straight talk, answer me honestly. Would you rather have the Cricket or the Rocket today?
The Rocket would not exist without the invention
That
of
was
the
a
Cricket.
dodge.
No, it wasn't a dodge. I'm just telling you, it would
the
not exist without the Cricket, right? So that you
Fair
just
enough.
need to know
Okay,
that.
so it's a yes and. The Cricket was great at its time. The Rocket is an improved upon version.
The Rocket
stood on the shoulders of the
today, the Rocket is a better product, but
There it
because
is.
of what we created with the Cricket.
There it is.
I'll give you that.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
And Hanjo Kim is the connective tissue that brought that all together for us.
Okay, well, I will agree with that, but we still should have gotten him.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's great. We're so
Yeah.
fortunate to have KOLs of his caliber to join us on this podcast, and really fantastic to just get his take on all things spine.
Yeah, I mean, I thought when we start to launch this and we talk to doctors like that, the perspective, the lessons learned for people listening, I think is going to be fantastic, right? Because it's real world. And I love the way he gave us that feedback.
Yeah, it's
So,
great.
yeah.
Great.
So, hot takes,
Yes.
right? So, the newest hot take is there's a lot of disruption going on in the United States around the FDA, right? We're
Yep.
hearing about a lot of rifts coming, and I'm curious what your perspective is. Hot take of what's going on right now. What do you think is going to happen with Health and Human Services as it relates to FDA and that impact on our industry?
So a couple things. I'm a huge believer that we can control what we can control, right? And that's true in life, that's true in business. You always have these macroeconomic factors that are going to affect business. You know this. I think this is yet another example where, yes, it's uncertain. Nobody's entirely sure how this is going to play out. It's obviously concerning. We're not entirely sure where this lands, but I do think that there's always a way to make it through these types of events. I'll give you an example. There are companies in our industry right now that are struggling because their products and their technologies are at various stages of approval with the FDA. And when cuts like this happen, that grinds to a halt. I have had calls from other CEOs asking for my help and support as we try to lobby together to get this done. Because obviously it's not a great situation when everything just stops, especially when you're waiting on an approval that is, time sensitive. I think organizations like AdvaMed and MDMR have been very, very helpful to advocate on behalf of the medical device manufacturers who understand, because it's made up of people like us, that know how important this is. All that being said, like I said before, I think you have to just trust that we can control what we can control. There will be a way forward. It may not look exactly like the process has looked historically, but obviously these are unprecedented times, and I think just being able to take it as it comes and then pivot and react accordingly is important. But yeah, it's a big deal, big change.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think timelines may be impacted.
Yep.
Ultimately, I believe we'll still get through this FDA process with our products, but it's going to be really interesting, and I think that'll be another topic for us to come back on as we watch this change.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah.
Definitely big news for this week, no question. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of Back Talk.
And we'll see you next time for more hot takes on spine.